Hey everybody, thank you for joining me on this broadcast about ducks. We are going to be talking about ducks today. And I decided to talk about ducks today basically because they are kind of like a natural accompaniment to chickens. When you get chickens, you tend to get ducks, they're kind of like a next step. But their care is a little bit different than chickens, all right? When they're adults, it's kind of the same, but when they're ducklings, when they're very young, the care and what they will need is different. So I decided to devote a whole broadcast to ducks and ducklings in general to address some of those differences, okay? Now, this broadcast is sponsored by our good friends at ManaPro. I love this company. They sent me this duck layer. This is actually a duck layer feed. They now have duck layer feed. They sent me this to test out, and I think it's great. We have, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ducks on our farm, 3 hens and 2 drakes. So you can imagine how much fun that is. But they're a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. They're a lot of fun. Anyways, but ManaPro sent me this. I think it's great. It is very important to make sure that you do get feed that is particular to ducks. As we are becoming more sophisticated with how we care for our poultry, general one-size-fits-all feeds no longer really fit the bill. Duck bill. No, seriously. It doesn't fit the bill anymore. It is, ducks and chickens do actually have different nutritional needs. So making sure that your ducks get a layer feed formulated for their particular needs is really important. So if you are getting ducks this year, maybe you have ducks and you want to make sure that they're as healthy as possible, go out and grab yourself some of this ManaPro layer feed. Duck layer feed. And you can be sure that your ducks, you can be sure your ducks are getting the nutrients that they need to lay you healthy eggs, okay? It is very, very critical. So next, let's talk about what you need for your ducks. We're going to start with ducklings. So what you need in particular, what we're going to talk about is food, shelter, waterers. Can you keep your ducklings with chicks? I got opinions on that one. Pools, obviously ducklings want to swim. And then some herbs you can use to make sure that you have healthy ducks. And then we're going to talk about feeding your adult ducks, okay? So the basic care when it comes to caring for chickens versus ducklings, chicks versus ducklings, it's basically the same. In terms of the fact that you should have food available to them 24 hours a day. The ducklings are going to need some extra heat because like chicks, they're not born with feathers, they're born with down, and the down isn't going to really keep them warm enough. We personally wait until about May or June to begin raising ducks. And the reason why is because I don't like heat lamps. I think that they are fires waiting to happen. And so we wait until it's warm enough in our area, at night. Basically, it doesn't get below 80 degrees at night in our area that time of year. So we wait until then just to make sure that we don't have to pull out the heat lamp and the ducklings are going to be warm enough. You can fudge it a bit more with ducks, I've noticed, than with chicks. Chicks really do require the 95 degrees the first week, the 90 degrees the second week, and so on, right? They really do require that. Ducks, I've noticed, don't quite need the same, rigor when it comes to temperature, but it's also a best practice to do that, but also just to keep an eye on them to make sure that they are warm enough. That is a really, really important thing to do. The reason why that's important is because ducks and chicks, basically, if they're cold, they're not going to eat. If they don't eat, they're not going to grow properly. If they don't grow properly, you're kind of defeating the point of getting them, right? So the heat and the warmth helps them do that. So talking about food, okay, this is one of the let's go with key sticking points with ducks. I see people don't follow this, and I've made this mistake myself in the past, and it is just a bad idea. You always want to go with a baby duck feed formulated for either specifically ducks or for an all poultry feed. Okay, this is really, really important. The reason why it is so important is because ducks need more vitamin B than chicks, okay? They require more niacin. If they do not get this, it can and it very likely will cause developmental issues in their bones and in their organs. Chick starter just doesn't have the nutrients that they need. So what you're going to end up with is if you feed them chick starter, you're not guaranteed to end up with ducklings and adult ducks with bone issues, but there's a high likelihood it could happen. Let's just go with that. So what will end up happening is you'll find that their bills don't develop correctly. You'll find that their feet, their legs don't develop correctly. They might have bowed legs. They might have some other sort of joint issues with their legs. They just don't grow right. So making sure that you use a feed, and that's why the feed that you give your ducks is really important. Making sure that you use a feed that is specifically formulated for ducks themselves, or all poultry feed, especially for ducklings, that is really, really critical. Now, Mana Pro does have a duck grower. Okay, this is their duck starter. So if you want my opinion on how to raise healthy ducklings, you're gonna want to go with something like this, right here, people. Okay, where it's formulated, and they put a lot of effort into making sure that it has. I'm gonna put this right here. It has everything that your ducklings need to grow healthy. Okay, so we got the layer feed and we got the duck starter grower feed. Okay, I would not veer off of this plan when it comes to your duck's feed. Okay, so I really that's just my recommendation. Don't be the guy who doesn't follow this recommendation and ends up with ducklings that have leg issues. Okay, so you definitely want to make sure that they have enough warmth, they're getting the right feed, and that you are giving them feed 24 hours a day. The reason for this is you want to make sure that they are getting enough food and that they're getting the right food. So 24 hours a day is my rule. The thing about ducklings that you should know, if you don't know this already, is that they are extremely messy. It's like unbelievable how messy they are. So you're going to have to clean out their waterers and their feeders every day and provide them with fresh duck starter. One thing that you probably will notice is that they kind of waste a lot of their feed. That's just part of the course. It's more important to make sure that they're getting enough feed at the time that they really are growing, and they grow extremely quickly. It's just really important that they're getting enough feed during the time that they're growing to make sure that they develop into healthy adults. This is just, don't disregard this advice. Is my best advice I can give you when it comes to, don't take anything else away from this broadcast. Take that away. Go with your duck starter and grower. Okay. Waterers, in my opinion, I got some strong opinions about waterers for your ducks too. In my opinion, the waterers should be fairly deep to make it easy for them to scoop up the water in their bills. They don't have pointed beaks like chickens do, so they can't it's harder for them to kind of scoop up the water. So make sure it's deep enough, but make sure it's not so deep that they're going to fall in. So, for example, with chicks, one thing that we're told to do, and one thing that I tell people to do, is to put rocks in the water to make sure that the chicks don't fall in. With ducks, you don't really want to do that. I would not go with a super deep dish. I would go with a dish that's probably got a good 1-inch clearance. Once they're big enough to actually reach into something like that, go with about a good 1-inch clearance to make it easier for them to go in there and get the water. They will play with it, and they will make their brooder extremely dirty. That's just ducks. That's just how ducks are. But it's important to follow a lot of these protocols just to make sure that they're actually getting enough water. You can go ahead and put the apple cider vinegar in their water. What I do is I go with 1 gallon of water to 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Okay, that's what I do. And then just give that to them 2 or 3 times a week in addition to regular water. Again, like chicks, it helps them develop the good gut flora, and it helps make sure that they grow into healthy adults and that they're able to expel their bodily waste easier. Okay. So that's the deal with waterers. I usually go with the mason jar waterers or just a dish. They're not like chicks where they're going to like fall in and drown. They're ducks. Ducks swim. So it's a little bit less of an issue in terms of like, you want to make sure that with chicks, for example, you want to make sure that you use the mason jar waterers. You want to make sure it's not too deep so that the chicks don't fall in and get wet. Ducks, it's not such an issue. If you do have ducks that, go and play in the water and then they get cold, you want to make sure that they are dried off, that you go ahead and you put them in like under a heat lamp very briefly, something, a heating pad, or dry them off with a nice towel, put them next to a radiator or something, where you can make sure that they are going to get warm and heat themselves back up. Just because they can play in water doesn't mean it's always a good idea to let them play in the water. We kind of discovered this when we first got ducks our first time. We had to make sure that they didn't play too long in the water and that the water wasn't too cold. So, for example, putting them outside of water in a 50-degree day is a really bad idea. Let them play inside, let them play in your sink, but we don't let them play in the water for too long, just to make sure that they're not going to get cold and hypothermic. So you can always wait and let them swim when they are older and they have feathers and they can better help themselves in those situations. So we might just do it for like 5 or 10 minutes and then we'll pull them out and we'll put them under the heater just to make sure that they stay safe and warm. So shelter, for ducklings, a brooder is best. You want to make sure that they are warm. You want to make sure that they can stay safe. You want to make sure that no predators can get to them. We keep our chicks and our ducklings in our cabin, one of our cabins, or coop, until they are old enough to really take care of themselves and they're fully feathered. We just want to make sure that nothing's, and the ducklings, when they're born, they're tiny. They're like literally so tiny. They grow very, very quickly, but they're very, very tiny. And so it's very easy for a predator like a possum, a raccoon, a dog to get in there and just decimate them. It's very, very easy. So whatever your shelter is, make sure that it's warm and make sure that it's safe. For older ducks, you want to make sure that we call them duck houses. You just want to make sure that they have a shelter that's out of the wind, out of the rain, safe from predators, but know that they cannot get into it as easily as chickens can into a coop. So if you are going to keep your ducks in a chicken coop, you're going to have a ladder for them to get up and into the coop so that they stay safe. And you probably are going to have to train them a little bit. I know that ours don't really get the ladder. God love them, they don't really get the ladder. We have to kind of show them every day how to get up. But that's something you got to do. You also need to make sure that you keep their house clean. I would clean it maybe even more frequently than chickens. Ducks, for some reason, ducks are much messier than chickens. Even ducklings, like the brooders, they're filthier than chickens. I don't know how to explain it. They just expel their waste very consistently, and it's a lot more and a lot more. Let's just go a lot more than chicks and chickens. And that, combined with the fact that they like to play and splash in water, leads to a very disgusting coop or brooder very, very quickly. So you just want to make sure that you're keeping it clean consistently. The good bedding for a brooder, I just go with wood chips. I go with the big flake wood chips. And I know there's people who don't agree with that, and that's fine. Straw is another one you can go with. People don't agree with straw either, but I think straw is fine. The reason I go with either one of those is that it's harder for them to eat the wood chips or the straw. The finer dust, the finer wood chips, they can easily inhale or decide to digest, and they will digest it. Last year we didn't have a duck last year digest wood chips. What they digested last year, I don't even know how they managed this. This was so gross. We had them in a brooder, and somehow a duckling got out of the brooder. And it was running around this cabin that I'm in right now. In the cabin, we had put, I bought duck feed, right? And I've been pulling off the strings off the packages. It wasn't this one, it was a different one because they didn't have this last year. But I was pulling the strings off and kind of like throwing them next to the bag. And the duckling got out and started eating the string, right? So I came in the morning, and the duckling was running around, flapping its wings, squealing its head off, and had a string lodged around its tongue, right? Never would have thought that they would do this in my life. So the moral of the story is that, 1, don't leave strings around when ducklings can get to them. 2, make sure your brooder is pretty secure. And 3, they will get into anything and try and ingest anything if they can. That's the real takeaway here. So I found with straw or larger flake bedding, they're a lot less likely to ingest them and it's just safer all the way around. That duckling is still out there. He's not a duckling anymore. He's a live duck. He's an adult duck now. He's living out there. He's having a ball. He's completely healthy. So there are no negative consequences of that. And it's just one of those things critters do, but it happens. So a very common question I get is, can you keep ducks with chicks, ducklings with chicks? And the answer is yes. There's kind of no behavioral reason why you can't, but I don't recommend it. And the reason I don't recommend it is because ducklings are incredibly messy, and they will throw their feet everywhere, they'll poop everywhere, and they'll throw the water everywhere, and it will get on your chicks. It will stick to the chicks down, and then the chicks will be cold, and they'll have a harder time staying warm. So, ducks and chicks get along well, but because ducklings are so messy, I never recommend keeping them with chicks. Just have 2 separate brooders, and everybody will grow up to be safe and happy. Now, speaking very quickly about feeding adult ducks, if you are keeping ducks for their eggs, you definitely want to make sure that you are feeding them a layer feed, okay? The reason you want to do this is because, again, you want to make sure that they're getting enough calcium and enough nutrients to make sure that they're laying healthy eggs for you and that they're healthy during the laying process. Without those nutrients, if they're kind of getting funky nutrients, you're letting them forage and they're kind of just eating whatever, it might shorten their laying life and it might shorten their lives, period. It's definitely okay to let them forage. It's definitely okay to let them eat bugs. A great treat to give them is mealworms or black soldier fly larvae in water, and let them dunk their bills in the water and then try to pick up the dried insects. But you should feed it as part of a complete diet and not by itself. Making sure that they have the layer feed is definitely what you want to do. These companies go ahead and they spend a lot of money making sure that the formulations are everything that your animal needs in order to grow healthy, that they'll constantly have the right nutrients they need. So that's why I always go with something like this, where you can be sure that it has the nutrients that they need so that they grow healthy and that they stay healthy as an adult and that they lay healthy eggs, okay? Now, for your adult ducks, making sure they have a pool available all the time is a good idea. One, because then they'll have water available all the time, right? And as they, no matter what stage of their life they're at, you always want to make sure that they have enough water. I give them water 24 hours a day, regardless of the stage of life. But make sure they have a pool. We'll let them engage in natural behaviors such as cleaning themselves, splashing around and playing, helping them establish their social order. So the pools themselves are a really important part of duck care. One thing that you will notice is that they make it extremely messy very, very quickly. So you'll probably have to clean it out every day. We use a kiddie pool. That's just something that we use with them. If you have something fancier, you can. I don't recommend putting them by a pond because a predator can come and get them, or somebody can decide to come around and shoot them, which can and does happen. I also don't recommend sinking the pool into the ground and then having it be like a sort of like a man-made pool. The reason I don't recommend that is because they're going to get it very dirty very quickly, and then you have to figure out a way to clean it out. So we found that above ground kiddie pools works the best. You can just take a hose and hose down the whole thing down, spray it down, and then it's clean, and you can just fill it up with water again for them to play with. Something else that we use is, those hanging feeders? They got like the bucket here, and then they have like the hooks that hang over on the side. We use those also for water because it keeps it off the ground. They can't splash as easily in it, and it's very easy to clean because they're plastic. So that's in addition to the pool, though. We don't just use either or. We use both the pool and the hanging water feeder thing, just to make sure that they're able to get fresh water consistently, but they can also splash around and clean themselves constantly. Ducks can't defend themselves like chickens can. Chickens have like a moderate amount of ability to defend themselves from predators. Ducks have even less. Because domestic ducks don't really fly because they're too heavy usually, and because ducks can't really run as fast as chickens can, they don't have the same ability to defend themselves as chickens do. So you definitely want to make sure that you don't put them out by a pond, and if you do, that it's fenced and it's safe, okay? So finally, let's just very, very quickly talk about herbs. Some great herbs to give your ducks are kind of the same things you give your chickens. Calendula will help with those yolks. Lavender will help in their nesting area. Ducks obviously don't use nesting boxes, they nest on the ground. So if you make them like a nesting area with straw, whatever, you can put lavender in that nesting area. So calendula, lavender, oregano is good to put in their feed as well. You can mix it with their layer feed. Pretty much any herb you give for chickens will be perfect for ducks also, okay? So I hope that this has helped. I hope that it has explained ducks to you a little bit, and that you feel more prepared to care for your ducks this spring. So just very, very quickly to recap, make sure that they have duck-specific grower and starter. That is very, very critical. If you don't walk away with any other information from this, walk away with that information. Make sure that you are giving them good shelter that's adequate and it's safe and warm. Make sure that when they're very young, you are not asking them to stay in pools for too long so that they get cold. When they are older, be sure to provide them with a pool so that they can clean themselves and have fresh water, and make sure that you clean it regularly so that they have fresh water regularly. Don't keep your ducklings with your chicks, because your chicks will probably be all the worse for it. That's just my advice. And make sure that you are giving them the same herbs and the same treats that you would give chickens, and just give them the same general care and love, all right? Okay, thanks for watching this. I hope it's helped. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will go ahead and answer them. Bye, thank you.